Bonsoir tout le monde, bienvenue, content de vous accueillir ce soir. Mon nom est Eric, j'aurai le plaisir de vous accompagner toute la soirée. On est donc à la veille de Noël, on va parler de spiritualité, de méditation. C'est pas un sujet aussi facile, mais on est vraiment content de vous accueillir ce soir. Alors, je ne serai pas seul à vous accueillir. Je veux d'abord vous présenter la personne qui va co-animer la soirée avec moi. Une femme exceptionnelle. En fait, elle aurait pu animer une conférence elle toute seule ce soir. C'est une femme que vous avez peut-être rencontrée sur le réseau donc BFM, au niveau de la télévision, le réseau d'information ici en France. Elle est une femme engagée, une femme convaincue qui travaille beaucoup dans tout ce qu'on appelle l'économie positive. Elle reçoit des personnalités, des gens d'affaires, des gens du monde politique. Et elle est challenge comme ça un petit peu dans l'avenir, comment avoir un avenir meilleur, et même dans un monde qui n'est pas toujours facile au niveau économique. Alors j'aimerais accueillir Audrey Tcherkov à se joindre avec moi sur scène. Merci d'accueillir Audrey.
Bonsoir à tous.
Bienvenue Audrey. Très content que tu sois avec nous ce soir aussi. On a une soirée très particulière et d'abord, on veut parler de méditation. On se demande un petit peu comment... Je sais que toi-même, tu as à cœur le changement social, l'économie positive. Comment tu arrives à jumeler un petit peu une soirée un peu spirituelle, parler de méditation, en sortant d'entrevues sur BFM, en parlant d'économie et de finances? Comment tu fais le lien un petit peu avec tout ça?
Alors justement, je pense que la méditation, c'est la clé. C'est la clé de beaucoup de choses. Je m'en suis rendu compte un peu trop tard à mon sens. Je pense que si je m'en étais rendu compte avant, j'aurais sûrement gagné, évité en tout cas des années de stress qui ont été assez inutiles. Et ce qui est intéressant, je pense en tout cas dans mon parcours, ce que j'aimerais vous dire ce soir, c'est que j'ai une carrière assez passionnante qui m'a emmenée sur différents continents. J'ai habité dans 15 pays différents. J'ai créé des entreprises. J'ai dirigé des entreprises que j'ai pas forcément créées. J'ai été patronne du Women's Forum. J'ai créé l'Institut d'économie positive, comme tu l'as dit. Et depuis 3 ans, j'ai des émissions à la télé qui me permettent de recevoir des dirigeants économiques et politiques, ces hommes et ces femmes qui sont censés contribuer à la marche du monde. Et je me suis rendu compte qu'en menant toutes ces activités de front, je suis aussi maman, donc je suis aussi épouse, je suis fille, je suis une sœur, que être présent, mais véritablement présent, en tout cas en ce qui me concerne, dans ce que je faisais, soit au travail ou alors avec mes proches, c'était quelque chose que je ne savais plus faire. Alors j'imagine qu'il y a beaucoup de gens dans cette salle qui sont un peu dans ce cas-là. Surtout quand on habite dans une grande ville où tout va très vite, on est un peu dans cette roue de laboratoire, voilà, comme un petit animal qui court sans cesse après le temps. Et j'ai eu une chance formidable de rencontrer une femme qui s'appelle Armelle, qui est juste derrière ce rideau. Vous pouvez l'applaudir. Et qui m'a dit, mais tu sais, il y a un truc génial, il y a un mouvement, une communauté qui s'appelle les Brahmakumaris. Alors, en tant que bonne Française, je me suis dit, mais qu'est-ce que c'est que ce culte? Ça fait très peur, ça ne m'intéresse pas. Elle me dit, mais pas du tout. C'est juste une communauté qui dit que si on veut être heureux, c'est très facile, parce que tout est à l'intérieur de nous. Et là, d'ailleurs, vous voyez, je montre mon cœur, alors que Sister Jayanti, tout à l'heure, elle va vous montrer la lumière qui est censée être entre nos 2 yeux. Et donc, je me suis intéressée à ce mouvement. Je suis allée à Oxford, j'ai fait une retraite spirituelle qui n'a duré que 3 jours, et je suis rentrée chez moi à Paris, et mon mari m'a dit, mais qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Tu n'es plus la même personne. Qui es-tu? Exactement. Et justement, je crois que donc ça a été un cadeau qui m'a été offert par la vie, de rencontrer les Brahmakumaris, de rencontrer Sister Jayanti, de te rencontrer, Eric. On peut applaudir Eric, parce qu'Eric vient tout droit du Canada.
J'accompagne Audrey, puis on va avoir la chance justement d'explorer la méditation. Voilà. Mais on s'est dit que d'abord, il y a encore des gens pour qui, je ne sais pas si parmi vous, certains sont venus un petit peu sceptiques quand même sur la validité de la méditation, l'efficacité de la méditation. Et on s'est dit que ce serait très bien d'accueillir vraiment un scientifique, neuroscientifique, qui va nous montrer comment la méditation, en fait, ce n'est plus une impression, mais c'est une science. Alors j'aimerais inviter avec nous sur le plateau Christophe Michel, de neuroscientifique de All Here.
Bonsoir
Et
Christophe.
Je vais lui céder mon micro et je vais le laisser entre tes mains.
Avec plaisir.
Et je reviens vous voir dans quelques minutes. Alors bienvenue Christophe, Michel, bienvenue.
Prenez place Christophe. Bienvenue sur cette scène.
Merci beaucoup, bonsoir.
Alors on vous présente comment Christophe? Parce que vous êtes professeur en neurosciences à l'Institut de Genève.
Oui, je suis biologiste par la base et je suis neuroscientifique à l'Université de Genève, à la faculté de médecine.
Alors vous vous présentez pas que comme ça, parce que vous vous présentez aussi comme étant le dirigeant du premier, peut-être même du seul d'ailleurs, institut de méditation quantifiée. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire?
Je suis directeur scientifique du All Here, qui est un institut à Genève qui essaie de comprendre avec la science, avec la technologie, la méditation, les changements dans le cerveau ce qui se passe quand on fait la méditation. Donc on essaie de comprendre qu'est-ce qui change dans le cerveau, qu'est-ce qui se passe si on entre dans l'état de méditation.
Donc ça veut dire que s'il y a encore quelques sceptiques dans la salle, après vous avoir écouté, on devrait comprendre que la méditation a bien un effet très clair sur le cerveau.
Je crois que nos résultats sont très très clairs. On vraiment voit des changements clairs dans le cerveau, que quelque chose a changé, que les pensées ont changé, que l'esprit a changé, qu'il y a des choses mesurables qui sont quantifiables pendant la méditation.
Et alors, vous avez eu la chance, me semble-t-il, d'accueillir Sister Jayanti. C'était en juin dernier pour la journée mondiale du yoga dans votre institut. Alors justement, quand Sister Jayanti était chez vous, qu'est-ce que vous avez pu quantifier, remarquer, mesurer?
Oui, justement, on a eu le plaisir d'avoir Sister Jayanti et Sister Yopi et Sister Philippa chez nous, à Genève. C'était un plaisir de les avoir. Ils ont été d'accord de mesurer leur cerveau pendant la méditation, de tous les trois, simultanément. C'était extrêmement fascinant. Et on a observé, c'est ce que je vais vous expliquer, on a observé clairement des changements, une focalisation de l'attention, une augmentation de l'attention, une diminution de ses pensées, de cette vandalisation mentale, une concentration, une fixation très claire et nette.
Alors, la méditation, enfin, ce que j'ai en tout cas pu comprendre quand j'ai vraiment étudié ce que vous faisiez, c'est que la méditation peut remodeler le cerveau grâce à la neuroplasticité. Ben alors, très concrètement, est-ce que ça veut dire, par exemple, que grâce à la méditation, on peut réussir à faire baisser, à diminuer des sentiments de colère, de frustration, ou encore d'anxiété, de culpabilité même peut-être ?
Il y a des études, il y a plus et plus des études qui montrent qu'il y a vraiment un changement à long terme, un changement dans votre comportement et un changement aussi de votre personnalité. Par exemple, la réduction de stress. Tout le monde est stressé aujourd'hui. Tout le monde a toujours des influences externes. Réduire le stress, réduire aussi les émotions, de contrôler mieux les émotions. Il y a des études qui montrent ça, mais soyons honnêtes, on est loin d'avoir des grandes études qui font preuve de ça. C'est beaucoup personnel et pas vraiment objectif. Mais...
Alors, justement, Christophe, vous dites tout le monde est stressé. Je vous propose de faire un petit test avec les personnes qui sont en face de nous. Qui se sent dans sa vie, alors peut-être pas tous les jours, mais parfois en tout cas stressé? Levez la main.
Voilà.
Bon, c'est plus que les 2/3. Et qui d'entre vous a déjà utilisé la méditation comme remède? Bon, on a une audience déjà un peu convaincue quand même.
Bravo. Donc c'est pas l'audience où je dois faire que je dois convaincre. Ils sont déjà tout convaincus que ça aide. Et je crois que la science peut vous aider de croire que ça aide et de mesurer ça. Si vous allez dans un gym parce que vous voulez perdre de poids, vous allez mesurer votre poids à la maison et vous allez retour à la gym parce que ça aide. Et pour la méditation, on essaie de faire la même chose, avoir une mesure objective qui vous aide, qui vous convainc que vous allez mieux, que ça aide. Et ça, je crois, c'est une motivation importante.
Et quand vous faites, parce que ça, pour le coup, je me pose la question de savoir si lorsque vous faites justement vos tests et que vous voyez le changement immédiat et implacable lors d'une méditation, est-ce que vous continuez à étudier le cerveau après et est-ce que ces changements et cet apaisement, en tout cas sur le cerveau, continuent d'avoir lieu après la méditation?
Oui, nous avons fait des études, et pas seulement nous, il y a plusieurs groupes de recherche qui ont fait des études à long terme de voir s'il y a un changement qui reste après la méditation ou après on a appris la méditation. On a par exemple montré que des jeunes aux États-Unis, à San Francisco, que les jeunes ont une attention plus prolongée, ils sont plus attentifs après quelques mois de méditation. Mais méditation, il faut être clair, méditation, c'est pas aller dans un week-end dans un wellness hotel, faire une retraite et après vous savez méditer. Pour avoir des effets à long terme, il faut le faire, c'est un effort, il faut revenir.
Donc il faut pratiquer.
Il faut pratiquer. C'est comme aller dans le gym, vous n'allez pas perdre le poids après une fois, non?
Oui, c'est ça, exactement. Oui, et c'est aussi un peu d'ailleurs quand on apprend une nouvelle langue. Pour bien la pratiquer, justement, il faut parler un peu tous les jours.
Oui, c'est un effort. Et je crois que c'est là où on peut aider. On peut aider de donner une mesure, de donner une information de progrès, que ça motive de revenir et de refaire, parce qu'on voit des mesures objectives que ça a changé quelque chose.
Et est-ce qu'on voit une différence entre les cerveaux des personnes qui méditent régulièrement et les cerveaux débutants?
Oui, ça c'est clair. Et si j'ai le temps pour vous expliquer ce qu'on mesure, c'est clair que les experts en méditation, mes vrais experts en méditation, ils ont des indices de ce qu'on mesure en cerveau, des indices beaucoup plus élevés que les débutants. C'est clair, c'est net.
Vous vouliez nous montrer une diapositive?
Je vais faire très bref, je vais sauter quelques-uns de ces diapos, mais c'est ce qu'on enregistre chez nous. C'est l'activité cérébrale, l'activité du cerveau électrique, avec des électrodes, avec des capteurs mettre sur la tête, 64 capteurs qui mesurent votre activité électrique chaque milliseconde. Et l'image à droite vous montre les aires, les régions dans le cerveau qui sont actives à chaque milliseconde. Et vous voyez que ça change constamment, ça change, les activations du cerveau changent. Et on peut quantifier ça, on peut mesurer ça, on peut analyser ça. Et on voit que ces changements, c'est parce que vos pensées, ils baladent dans différents pensées. Votre esprit balade dans les pensées. Vous avez une sorte de pensée peut-être à la passé, à la future. Vous pensez à ce qui est arrivé pendant les dîners hier soir, c'est ce que vous devez faire demain. Donc ça fait des changements dans le cerveau. Et si je peux passer au prochain diapo, vous voyez à droite, si vous êtes au repos, sans méditation, vous avez constamment changé vos activités cérébrales. Vous allez, comme j'ai dit, vous allez penser à la passé, à le futur, à la présence. Et en méditation, ces changements rapides, ils s'arrêtent. Vous voyez les lignes bleues là, qui sont les lignes où ça change l'activité, ils sont beaucoup moins souvent. Donc on reste beaucoup plus long dans un certain état de pensée et ce qu'on appelle, nous, la stabilité de l'esprit. Donc vous avez moins de changements, moins de hectique, moins de chaotique, mais une organisation, une stabilité de l'esprit. Et le prochain diapo, juste pour vous montrer, c'est pas seulement que vous restez plus longtemps dans un certain état, mais le plus intéressant, c'est que vous avez certains états ou certaines pensées que vous commencez à faire beaucoup plus que d'autres. On voit une diminution à gauche, on voit une diminution des pensées spontanées. Vous arrêtez de faire cette mind wandering, cette voyage mental dans le temps. Vous arrêtez de faire ça et vous concentrez. Vous avez une attention beaucoup plus augmentée, une régulation de l'attention sur des régions en arrière de votre tête qui sont responsables pour l'attention, qui sont beaucoup augmentées. Et en plus, les régions qui sont responsables pour la perception, la conscience de soi, de votre corps, ils augmentent. Donc vous êtes plus attentif à vous, à votre présence, à vous dans le moment là. Et vous arrêtez de balader dans tous les sens avec vos pensées. Donc ça, ce qu'on observe très clairement, et le prochain et le dernier diapo, si vous voulez, montre ça chez un expert très, très avancé. Et vous voyez, les premières 4 minutes, il n'était pas en méditation, il était au repos, il a laissé son pensée balader, et après 4 minutes, il est entré dans la méditation. Et vous voyez que ça descend beaucoup, cette mind-wandering, cette balade dans les pensées, et ça augmente très très fortement l'attention et la perception de soi. Et avec ça, on peut calculer, ce qu'on a développé, c'est un indice, un chiffre qui vous donne l'information de combien vous avez réussi de focaliser votre attention, de focaliser sur soi-même et de arrêter de faire ces pensées. Donc ça, c'est l'indice qu'on essaye de vendre comme mesurer le poids.
La conscience de soi, voilà, ou l'art d'être présent. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler, pour terminer, Christophe, des prochaines pistes de recherche pour l'Institut?
Ce que nous avons fait maintenant, grâce à mes collaborateurs, on a enregistré plus de 400 personnes dans tout le monde. On était en Inde, on était au Japon, on était dans des monastères, on était dans des retraites. On a enregistré des gens de différentes écoles de méditation, différentes pratiques de méditation. On n'est pas concentré sur une pratique, on accepte tout. On aimerait comparer qu'est-ce qui est similaire entre les différents méditation ou école de méditation, qu'est-ce qu'il est différent. Donc on a beaucoup d'enregistrements, et la prochaine étape, c'est d'analyser, c'est de comparer, c'est de voir qu'est-ce qui est différent entre les débutants, qu'est-ce qui est différent entre les débutants et les avancés, et qu'est-ce que fait la personnalité, qu'est-ce que c'est le changement de personnalité chez les experts de méditation. Donc on a beaucoup de travail à faire.
Alors justement, si on veut suivre vos travaux, Christophe, où est-ce qu'on va? Sur quel site? Il y a un site internet?
Il y a un site internet, allhere.org. Allhere.org à Genève, où on essaie de décrire tout ce qu'on a fait et tout ce qu'on va faire dans le futur. Tous les résultats vont être là, et tous les résultats peuvent être explorés et regardés.
Merci Christophe Michel, on va suivre cela de très près. Vous pouvez l'applaudir. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci infiniment.
Eric.
Je ne sais pas si après ça, j'ai envie d'aller me faire tester pour
on a tous
si ma
envie.
méditation fonctionne ou pas. On pourrait essayer quand même.
Oui, absolument.
Alors, on vous a annoncé la venue d'une femme exceptionnelle. Elle est ici avec nous dans la salle. On va vouloir l'accueillir très bientôt. Mais avant, on pourrait la présenter de bien des façons.
Oui.
Tu l'as rencontrée hier soir aussi. On a eu la chance d'être en rencontre très, très proche. Une femme exceptionnelle, la dirigeante ou co-dirigeante en ce moment des Brahma Kumaris Monde. Donc, elle est vraiment responsable d'une organisation qu'on définit souvent comme la plus grande organisation spirituelle dirigée par des femmes. Une femme d'expérience, plus de 50 ans de pratique au sein de l'organisation. Un parcours de vie unique.
Unique.
Et pour vous la présenter, on a une toute petite vidéo de quelques minutes qui va vous permettre d'avoir mieux une façon de la rencontrer personnellement avant qu'on l'invite à monter sur scène. Alors, je vous invite à regarder la vidéo qui suit.
The Brahma Kumaris is the world's largest spiritual organization, led by women. With more than 7,500 teaching centers across 110 countries. At the heart of this global movement stands Sister Jayanti, whose clarity, warmth, and deep commitment to spiritual values have touched millions of lives. Sister Jayanti was born in Pune and was brought up in a traditional Indian family. When she was 8 years old, the family moved to London, where she completed her education. This is where her journey began. Inspired by her mother's courage to follow the path of the Brahma Kumaris and guided by the wisdom of Dadi Janki, Sister Jayanti embraced spirituality as the foundation of her life. She sees herself as an instrument to clarify the teachings of the East to those in the West. She went on to serve as Dadi Janki's translator as centers in the UK were established. Over time, she grew into an extraordinary spiritual ambassador, author of more than a dozen books, an inspiring public speaker, and a mentor for countless students. Her work with the United Nations has been groundbreaking. The Brahma Kumaris received 7 Peace Messenger Awards for their Million Minutes of Peace project. Today, the organization holds general consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, the highest status granted to NGOs. Always rooted in the vision of a world anchored in spiritual principles and shared humanity, Sister Jayanti continues to champion critical global causes from peace building to climate change. Known for her compassion, simplicity, and wisdom, Sister Jayanti inspires us to look within, to find peace in our own hearts, and to use that peace to transform our world.
Alors, donc, sans plus tarder, j'aimerais inviter notre très chère Sister Jayanti à venir nous joindre sur scène. I will invite you to join us on stage. Elle a 2 charmantes compagnes.
Et elle est très bien accompagnée, c'est ce que j'allais dire. Bonsoir.
I'll invite you to go in front of the stage, Sister Jayanti, and Et pendant que Sister Jayanti va s'installer, je vous invite donc à la suite du programme. Denzel Sinclair, une des grandes voix du jazz, chanteur de jazz canadien, très connu au Canada, qu'on a le plaisir d'accueillir et qui va nous accompagner pour les prochaines minutes. Alors, we can sit ourselves and then there will be a song during the time.
Reste là, laisse les rôles glisser dans l'oubli et les regrets sombrer dans la nuit. Laisse tout ça tomber. Prends ma main et laisse-moi t'emmener loin au-delà du ciel où le temps n'existe pas, seulement le silence, seulement la paix que tu cherchais de tous côtés. Regarde en toi, elle est là, tu t'es embrassé. Prends le temps d'être ton meilleur ami. Prends le temps de chérir ta richesse, celle qui ne finit jamais ici. Tu as tout ce qu'il se faut en toi. Tu es paix, amour et puissance. Tu étais, tu seras jamais un beau point de lumière brillant. Apprenez à voir plus loin que ce que l'on vous montre. Il y a plus que ce que les yeux affrontent. Et pour ça, le silence est la clé. La paix que tu cherchais de tous côtés. beauté. Regarde en toi, elle est là, prête à t'embrasser. Prends le temps de te connaître, prends le temps d'être ton meilleur ami, prends le temps de chérir ta richesse, celle qui ne finit jamais ici. Tu as tout ce qu'il te faut en toi. Tu es paix, amour et puissance. Tu étais, tu seras jamais un beau point de lumière brillante. Tu es l'auteur de ton propre destin. Rallume ta lumière et reprends ton chemin. Prends le temps de te connaître, prends le temps d'être ton meilleur ami, prends le temps de chérir ta richesse, celle qui ne finit jamais ici. Tu as tout ce qu'il faut en toi. Tu es paix, amour et puissance. Tu étais, tu seras à jamais un beau point de lumière brillante. Tu étais, tu seras à jamais un beau point de lumière brillante. Tu étais, tu seras à jamais un beau point de lumière brillante.
Alors un grand merci très spécial à Denzel. A very, very big thank you to Denzel Sinclair, because he just flew for today from Canada and he's returning tomorrow again to Canada for another concert. But he wanted to come and translate the song in French just for today. So big thank you, Denzel. Now, you might be surprised, but that was also a meditation song. So, Sister Genty, a very, very warm welcome. We're very happy to have you here in Paris. And we heard about the scientific approach to meditation. And I think the first part, and I know Audrey has quite a lot of questions for you.
Too many.
And they're tough questions. Mine will be easy, but hers, I don't know. So, I'll start with a very simple one, but how will you help us to transit from the scientific aspect of meditation to something very practical? What do you do when you meditate? Were you meditating now? Or were you dancing?
I was, meditating.
So tell us a little bit how to move from, yes, analyzing, understanding meditation, but really yours is more like on a spiritual level that we're going to be speaking tonight. So how do you connect what you heard on the scientific level to your practice of meditation?
Thank you, Eric. And it's a privilege and a joy to be here with Audrey and yourself and all of you. And it was great to hear Denzel. It's beautiful to see how science is able to validate the things that meditation gives us the experience of. Because in today's world, we want evidence, we want proof. And so when science is showing us those results that you saw, that the brain actually slows down, the brain is actually able to focus and concentrate, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg, in a sense. And my hope is that science is going to go deeper into the whole subject of consciousness and be able to give us more validation. One other validation that you might be interested in is that there's a whole subject called positive psychology. 40 years ago, I don't think anybody had heard of positive psychology, just psychology. And then about 40 years ago, positive psychology started. And what they found was that meditators are able to have more positive feelings and emotions than most other people. And they experimented with, can you increase positive feelings and emotions like love and compassion and kindness and honesty? And they found that yes, you can increase them. Have a bar of chocolate and it'll increase your level. But after one bar of chocolate, or maybe half a bar, carry on eating chocolate. Is it going to give you the same result? No way. It's going to make you feel, I don't want to see another chocolate for a year. And so external things that can induce good feelings, positive feelings, can help for a short time, but you can't carry on with those. And then your level of positivity drops again. But they found that this is scientific evidence. They found that if you meditate, then definitely those positive feelings and emotions continually increase. And even after you stop meditation, those feelings don't disappear. They're actually with you in your practical life. So my hope is that as science develops more and more refined instruments, they'll be able to give us more evidence of all of the things that spirituality, yogis, mystics, meditators across time, across traditions have always experienced.
And if I may say, I think it's also very much linked to energy, because just sitting here next to you, I feel lots of positivity. So, Sister Jayanti, let's talk about you just for a minute. I know it's not something that you're used to do, but I think it's very important for all of us to understand, before becoming the calm, grounded, unwavering spiritual leader that you are today, you were a little girl that we saw on those pictures. You were born in Pune, in India, in a family with expectations, obviously, as we all did and do. And I would like to understand, who was that little girl before the path became clear?
One of the things that motivated me as a young girl was that I wanted to serve, but I didn't know in what capacity. And so I thought that as time goes on, I'll discover in what path I can serve humanity, because I'd witnessed poverty and I'd witnessed sadness in people. I thought there must be a way to help people. And then when I found meditation, I knew that this was the way.
And would you say that spiritual leadership comes from abstraction, or does it come from a choice? And do you remember in your life when you made that choice, when it was clear that this was your path?
I was 18 when I'd started university in London, and I had an out-of-body experience. I found myself here. I was sitting in this theatre, and the professor was writing chemical formulae. I was studying pharmacy. So he was writing chemical formulae on the whiteboard. And I found myself up here looking down, thinking, why am I here? What am I doing? And I told myself, don't be silly. And I brought myself back and carried on with things. And then that evening, talking to my parents, I described this experience. And my father and me had a very good friendship, not just a father figure, but both my parents were good friends. And so my father said, why don't you spend some time getting to know your roots in India? I traveled to India many times, but not spent any time. So I came to India really to discover. And after a few months of just being a tourist, I I thought I need something to educate my mind. And I went to the people I knew because my mother and grandmother were part of the Brahma Kumaris. So I went to Dadi Janki. Maybe some of you here in this gathering also met her. She came to France many times. And what she told me was amazing. And it made me want to learn to meditate. And so I started learning the same day. And 6 weeks later, I decided this is to be my life.
Wow. And that was it. You were sure about your choice.
I was absolutely sure.
And you never looked back.
No, just moving forward, not going back.
Yeah. And one of your key teaching is that we are not our bodies, we are not our roles, we are not our titles. Can you explain us how to really find our real identity in a world where everything is defining by what the society, like puts on us as a title, as a role?
When anyone asks you who you are, you'll say something according to nationality, something according to your religion, something according to gender, maybe your profession, your career, maybe your role. You're a mother, you're a friend, you're a father, you're a brother. So we'll always define ourselves in all of these things. But in fact, there's something which is deep inside, which cannot be defined by role or responsibility or position or possessions. Sometimes we define people by the size of their house or the size of their car. But go deep inside and you'll realize that all of these things are out there. And I need to go on a journey inside to be able to know myself. And that's the journey of meditation. And when you go on that inner journey, you come to realize that there's an energy just here behind the forehead, in front of the brain. And it's this energy that actually is made up of my thoughts, my feelings, my memory, my personality, all the things that I am unique. That is within the soul. All the other things that are external, you could find thousands, maybe even millions, who would fit in within all those categories. And yet you know from your experience, each and every one of us is absolutely unique. Is that right? And that uniqueness is not in any of these external things. That uniqueness is within the inner being. The being, we talk about human being. So the human is the physiology, but the being is that light, that energy, that awareness that is within. And the journey of meditation is to understand what's going on deeply within myself. So I get to know myself more and more.
I see also Audrey smiling a lot because I know this is one of the favorite parts when you describe the distinction between the human and the being. And I know Audrey likes very much to remind us, and her girls, she has two little girls. And I know you already taught them how to think of the soul, think of the being. But also, we live lives that are so intense sometimes. And yes, we may not be our title, but when you're very busy, when you're really in the day-to-day stress, how do you keep maintaining that awareness of the self, which is really subtle? And even you, over the years, you were that little girl. Now you moved into a totally different phase in your life. You're heading one of the biggest organizations on a spiritual level. How do we maintain that awareness when the things outside are really, really getting complicated? And I know Audrey needs that also in her world because I've seen her day-to-day life. It's busy. So you need to help her.
It's too busy.
In fact, I heard a Zen saying just yesterday, And the saying goes something like, the Master says, everyone needs to spend time, at least 20 minutes in meditation every day. And if you're a very busy person, you need to spend an hour in silence in meditation. And so, in a way, that describes it. It's when there's stress, it's when there's a lot of things happening, there's chaos out there. That's when I need to be able to center myself and go inside and connect with the being that I am. And it doesn't happen like this, but it happens through consistent practice. And so if every day I do spend a few minutes just getting to know myself more and more, do you get surprised by your reactions sometimes? Or you say, I said this and I wasn't meaning to say it. I really didn't mean it. And of course then, if what you said was brilliant and beneficial, wonderful, but if what you said spontaneously was not so beneficial, then to try and repair the damage takes a lot of effort and time and energy. So how come after being with myself 20 years, or 40 years, or 60 years, or plus, I still can't know how I'm going to respond in a situation? And that happens to all of us. I say things, I didn't really mean that. I shouldn't have said it. I don't really know myself as well as I could. I have a question. When did you last have a deep conversation with yourself? Not just asking yourself whether you want pizza today or pasta today, but a really deep, profound conversation.
I see a lot of heads going the other way. No. How about we were to offer them right now a little moment where you can invite us to experiment? Because I know we're going to talk about inner freedom. This is a big topic as well. But about the meditation, how about we create a little space, just 2-3 minutes, to guide us in how to have that conversation with the self and that awareness?
Yes, surely. Carry on sitting comfortably, but probably the best way is to have both feet on the ground so that the body is balanced and your back straight so that the mind stays alert. And you can keep your eyes open or close your eyes. It doesn't matter, whatever is comfortable for you. And I'll speak out my own thoughts as I meditate and invite you to follow these ideas. I go inside. I look at my thoughts. And as I watch my thoughts, the speed of my thoughts slows down. And now I can even choose which thought I wish to have. I select the thought of peace. As I hold peace in my mind, I begin to feel peaceful. And I realize that peace is not outside of me. Peace is inside. And going deeper and deeper within my own inner world, peace feels natural, peace feels comfortable. I begin to have a glimpse of the inner being. I am being of light. I am a being of peace. Peace is within me, and when I choose, I can come back to this awareness and connect with peace inside. And as I become peaceful, the vibrations of peace reach out, and our collective vibrations of peace reach beyond these walls and out into the world. And every drop of peace adds to that energy that can bring peace to all. I hold this awareness, and I come back to the consciousness of the physical dimension and this room, that I keep this feeling of peace within myself. Om means I am. Shanti means peace. Om Shanti. Thank you for joining the experiment.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Sister Jayanti. So, I'm going to share with you my experience. So, as you started to talk, my mind became much more quiet. And I don't know if it's your case. Then I started to think, oh my God, did I turn off the oven before I left my house? Or I have to send that email, I really shouldn't forget before I go to bed. Or I hope my kids are doing their homework right now. So I have two questions. Is it okay if our mind actually starts raising, like items or questions when we start meditating? And second question, what should we do to make them disappear?
What happens is that we are used to thinking a dozen things at the same time. And so when we want to meditate and go deep inside, all these thoughts and questions cross our mind. And what I learned to do is to say, okay, wait, I'm going to come back to you. My children, well, somebody would have phoned me if it was anything serious. I'll come back and check. What's cooking for dinner tonight? I'll check that later. So you just gently talk to your mind and keep all those things pending. You're not dismissing them, they're important, but I'll come back to you. And you continue with your inner journey. And so this process of learning to focus and concentrate is something that we all have to try. And gradually, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it continues to grow. When you first start doing deep breathing, you have to learn how to do it. When you start exercising, or a simple thing, playing tennis, you practice, and you perfect it.
So it's all about practice. So you carry a lot of responsibilities on your shoulder, right? The Brahma Kumaris are in over 120 countries. It gathers over 1 million members. It's the largest spiritual community, as we said. Do you ever feel under pressure? And how How do you juggle with that?
It's not me alone, it's a huge, huge team.
Yeah.
For example, Eric runs the show in Canada, not just one center, but all the centers in Canada. We have a team that leads the activities here in France, and so the load is not on one set of shoulders, but the load is being carried by everybody. And for example, Eric has a whole team, part of the core team, that look after everything in Canada. So again, not alone. But the other feeling that we have, which is the strongest feeling, is that it's not my work. Yes, I carry responsibility and accountability, but there's someone up above. There's a divine power that's making things move forward. When the London Centre started in 1971, it was just a handful of us who were there. And I had no idea that things would grow in the way that they have. But I knew that surely there was a divine plan that wanted to bring peace into the world, a divine plan that wanted to end the darkness and bring the light into the world again. And so it was with that faith, that conviction, that this was the track to move on. And I know that the things that I've witnessed in the last 50 plus years have absolutely not been the responsibility of any human being. I've seen magic happen in a beautiful way with many, many instruments across the world, all giving their little finger of cooperation. There's an image they have in India that when it was important to lift a mountain, now who can lift the mountain? But when a group of people came together and they gave their little finger of cooperation, the mountain got lifted. And so it's a story, but it's symbolic of the fact that when many hands come together, then the workload becomes very light. But the power with which we are doing that work as instruments comes from up above, not from just human energy.
Okay, now let's talk about anger. Because, so it's first of all a very natural feeling to feel angry. You know, on the image that we shared at the beginning with Eric, we saw you sitting at the United Nations, right? So at the United Nations, lots of political leaders are sharing commitments and promises that actually they break, you know, like most of the time, right? Do you ever feel angry about that, or about what's going on in the world that's not right according to your values, or not?
If I felt anger, I wouldn't be able to serve there. I'd just get upset.
Yeah.
And I would have no use being there at all. But I understand what's happening to the human family. And what has happened is that when we forget ourselves and we get caught up just in this identity, I lose touch with not just my identity, but you mentioned values. Every soul carries within itself intrinsic goodness and kindness and truth and love. And I believe that totally. Do all of you believe it? Who believes that the human soul has kindness and goodness? I think that faith in human beings is very important. Some people have lost that faith also.
Yeah.
But I believe that what's happened is that when I lose touch with my own inner being and I just get caught up in this, I lose touch with that goodness, that love, that truth, that joy. And this is why you see all the addictions that we're seeing outside, whether it's substance addictions, whether it's food addiction, whether it's alcohol, whatever. But shopping, but we think that these are the things that are going to bring me happiness. And then we find it's not true, it's not working. And so then we say, well, what can I do to be happy? But in fact, that happiness is within. And so I think that if people understand that there is peace within, that there is joy within, then they wouldn't get angry. They get angry and frustrated because of control issues, possessiveness, and even leaders today are saying that the answers to all the problems of the world and who has created the crises that the world is going through. It's us. It's you and me. It's all of us. But more than thinking about you and me, I have to look at myself. And yes, definitely, there's many things in which I have contributed to the things that are going on outside, whether it's consumerism, whether it's the environment issue, whatever it may be. And so I know that if I can bring about change within myself by connecting with my own original qualities of peace and love, I'm going to be able to express them in my life, and I'm going to be able to change at least my own family. I'm going to be able to have an impact on my colleagues at work, and there'll be a snowball effect, and there'll be many, many others who are influenced in the right direction also. I think we underestimate the value of goodness and the power of goodness. I don't think it's a fairy story that says that good will conquer evil. I believe it's the truth, it's the reality. And while we've forgotten our own identity, we've moved very far away from that goodness. And so you just need to press a button, not a physical button, but come back to that awareness of who I am. And even in the few minutes of silence, I'm sure maybe there was a moment, just a moment of peace that some of you experienced. And so try more, and you discover more, and you feel more, and it expresses itself in your life.
But I think this what you just said about if I'm angry, I'm not really able to respond properly, right? I think it opens the door to the conversation we wanted to have as well, where maybe we need to free ourselves from certain feelings or certain reactions or certain attitudes. And I think that as much there are so many good benefits, that we can feel from meditation, but also the idea of being free within ourselves. And sometimes to free the self from anger is not, just like unsubscribing from a mailing list. It can be a little bit more complicated. So if we were to move into that idea of inner freedom, what's the process to remove that which will really make me feel in bondage or in prison within myself?
We've been talking about the issue of anger, and I'd like to share a personal experience. Anger is very easy to talk about because it's so visible.
But that was not a time when you were angry, right?
There was a time when I was very angry. Ego is very subtle, and if somebody tells you you have ego, you're probably not going to believe it. But anger is something you can't deny. You feel it, but it's very visible. And so it's easy to talk about it in that context. I didn't really know about anger till I actually came and lived in the centre. And so that would have been in particular in the London centre when Daddy had come. So that would have been around when I was about 25. And why I hadn't really experienced anger was because life was comfortable, things were going my way, everything was fine. And I'd get upset, but not angry as such. And then I started living in the centre, and it was a small group of people. And I found that people would say, yes, they're going to be available to help, and then they don't turn up. Or they say they're coming, they turn up late. Or they come and they don't do things in the way that you expect them to. And so I was getting more and more irritated. And it came to a point when, a few years later, it didn't happen like this, but the irritation actually then became anger. And there was a person at the center who had made quite a major financial error. And she was in a different place, I was in a different place, and I was on the phone to her. And I got very angry because she wasn't able to explain and she wasn't actually taking responsibility. And if you're a charity, it's money and we have to be careful of what's going on. And at that time, it felt that it was a very major thing. And when I put the phone down, I realized what I'd done. And Dadi, the senior elder that I was living with, had been in the next room, but she must have heard me. And she was just very quiet. She didn't say anything, but she knew. But my realization at that moment was such a deep realization because I'd caused sorrow to another. I knew I had, but I'd also caused sorrow to myself for having moved so far away from what I knew to be the truth. And so the pain of that was there. But that was a moment of transformation, of deep realization of how negative forces can overtake and make you do things you really did not intend to. And of course, the anger wasn't going to sort out the situation. It was if I had a cool head and a warm heart that things could have been sorted out quite easily. But at that moment, it was a hot head and a cold heart. And so that was a big lesson for me. And from that moment on, I made that decision. I won't allow anger to overtake me again. And when I can see myself getting irritated, I'll talk to myself and stop it there. And the process took time, but today, how can anyone ever say that you're totally free? But I think I've gone a long way. And
well, that's why I was kind of joking, asking you, it's not a story about anger, because I couldn't imagine you being angry. I never heard that story. So in a way, I feel better about my own anger now. So thanks for sharing. So you're human after all. I never saw Sister Genti ever being either irritated or negative. So that's why I was joking, thinking it's not possible. So thank you for telling us we can all hope to move forward in that direction. Yeah.
But let's share maybe a takeaway with those people, because if we think about inequalities, so what can we tell the people who are experiencing a very unfair situation, right? Or a very hard and strong loneliness. Because when you are not surrounded by the right people, or if you are not in the right environment, and if you experience those things, it's very difficult for your brain on its own to say, okay, I know that good will win over the evil, because you are the victim, of the situation. So what can we tell to those people?
When you spoke about insecurity and injustice, actually you talked about injustice and I translated it as insecurities. I want to share again my personal experience of that situation. Growing up in London in the 60s, I didn't face racial discrimination, but I did face gender discrimination. And it became very clear to me that although we are in a developed country, and even today there's definitely still a glass ceiling, even the United Nations, although it stands for justice, we haven't had a single Secretary General who's a woman yet. Now, how long we have to wait, let's see. And I don't believe that there are women who don't have the qualifications to fulfill that role. So everywhere, there's still gender inequality. And I was very lucky that I found meditation, or meditation found me, when I was still in my teens. And so I didn't become just an angry woman. Otherwise, I could have got very angry about that. But soon after discovering meditation and practicing meditation, there's something very beautiful that happens. You begin to discover your own inner values, and you start using them in your life, and you recognize that your self-esteem, your dignity is in your own hands, and you don't let anyone else take your dignity away. The inner demons take away your dignity, but nobody else can take away your dignity. And so I was very lucky, because by the time I actually faced racial discrimination, and that came from, I can date it, 1972, when there was a big influx of people from different culture, different color, coming into Britain, because there'd been a big story in Uganda at that time, and people were expelled from that country. And you could feel the atmosphere change in London, all over the UK. It was very dramatic. And I faced many times after that situations where I knew that it was the color of my skin or my name that had caused this, rather than who I am as a person. But by then, I'd developed my own inner state of self-esteem to the point where I can't remember a situation where I stopped being confident and secure because of something that somebody else had said. And so I think knowing yourself is such a big lesson in life. And many of us don't actually come to terms with it through most of our life. But now there's knowledge is available everywhere. It's no longer restricted. You don't even have to go to a place. Everything is available for everyone online. But it's very important to know myself and find my own space in here in which I'm very, very secure. It's not ego, but it's a state of stability in which you don't get shaken, and your stability can help others like you. And so I think many others who also have faced injustice or situations that could maybe shake them, through following that one simple lesson of knowing I am not my skin. There was a very lovely comment that had come to me as part of a program we were doing. I think Eric would remember it, Global Cooperation for a Better World. And this was a statement that had come from someone in Africa. And they wrote, "The color of my skin may be different, but the color of our blood, sweat, and tears is the same. And my skin is only 1/16 of an inch deep."
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so, yes, many people... Many people discover that by going deep inside, and not just my blood, sweat, and tears, but actually the being that I am, the soul, we all have the same qualities. And yes, they develop in different ways according to our sustenance, our nurture, our life, but we carry that same kindness and goodness within ourselves.
So since you were talking about gender discrimination just now, can you tell us what's very special about the constitution of the Brahma Kumaris?
When Brahma Baba had his visions in 1936, so we're coming up to 90 years soon, the vision he had was a world of equality and justice, a better world for all. And he looked around and he saw that the big injustice in that part of the world, the subcontinent, India, Pakistan were together, and he was in that place, Sindh, which today is actually in Pakistan. But at that time, in that subcontinent, he looked around and he saw that women were being given a raw deal. And he thought that, is there something I can do to support justice? And maybe that could be by giving women an opportunity to be teachers and leaders. And so he consciously did this. And today, Brahma Kumari's constitution in India still states that women have to be the leaders. And yes, we've come a long way, but further to go. But when it was a group of about 400 people that came together with Brahma Baba at that time, and they started to meditate and explore in the laboratory of the mind what's going on in here. And they spent 14 years as a community exploring this. And then it was time to move out and serve others, and they did that. And at first there was a huge reaction. People in the 50s in India thought it was very strange to have women as spiritual teachers. But they kept their dignity, they continued to serve. And today I think, whether in India or the Indian diaspora across the world, most people would have heard of Brahma Kumaris and know of the work that we're doing. So yes, it's been a long journey, but the dignity of those women was incredible. When they went out to serve, and they didn't have books that they could give, they didn't have any technical aids, they just had love for God in their hearts and a mind that was pure and clean. And so the divine was able to work through them. And here we are today.
Absolument. So, as Eric launched the conversation about inner freedom, and as the world is experiencing many different types of griefs, on the environmental point of view, on the social field as well, on the political field also, do you think that for the world to finally find its way back up again, inner freedom can be a solution?
Absolutely. If you think about it, and it sounds very simplistic when you first hear it, but really just be very detached from everything, and you'll probably find that the cause of all the problems that we experience today is ego, or anger, or greed, or attachment, or lust. These are the 5 inner demons, and you're not outside, they're inside. And it's these that have multiplied to the state that we're in today, and have taken us further and further away from our own inner goodness. And so if I can learn to deal with all these negative forces, then yes, definitely, I can experience a state of joy and peace, truth and love that I can share with others.
And how can we make sure that once we found that inner freedom, it's not going to be something that's going to last very little time, that's going to be sustainable? How can we keep that inner freedom, that inner peace?
Think about a candle. And if a candle is just the flame, then the wind blows it in many directions. But if you put a glass protecting barrier around it, then it's safe. It's protected from all the winds and the things out there. And so meditation works like that. I'm keeping this flame shining, and I want to make it brighter and brighter so that it illuminates my path, but also helps maybe others along the way. So I need that protection that meditation can give me, so that the flame doesn't waver, doesn't flicker, doesn't go out, but stays brighter and stronger and keeps getting brighter all the time.
So you have hope.
I have a guarantee. I have a guarantee that the goodness of the human spirit is going to carry us forward, that with help from above, we can definitely together create a better world. And I think this is the right time, a time of transition. And I don't just mean Christmas time, it's a good time, because it's in the darkness that we celebrate hope and peace and joy. Never mind all the shopping and the food and everything else around Christmas, but the essential message of Christmas is have love and good wishes for all, and peace is possible. And so I think that Christmas is the right time to be having this program.
I think you touch on something I know that Audrey liked a lot, which it's not just that I have hope, but I have a guarantee that it is going to be better. And I think this is your Christmas gift, Audrey, from Sister Jayanti, because I know you liked it very much last night when she mentioned that.
Well, I just believe in the goodness of humanity. And I believe also that there is a divine power that can support us and help us and carry us forward. So definitely, I believe that we're on the threshold of a new day, a new beginning.
But there's something wonderful that's why we wanted to have you, Audrey, also to join Sister Jayanti, because we knew you connect with the French audience. You are yourself a broadcaster in a way. You have your own show. You talk to people all the time. And we invited all of you to come. And we know it's a time which is busy for Christmas time when people's minds are scattered. We invited Denzel to join us from Canada to bring his voice. And we're inviting us all the yogis to join us on stage, because I think the intention was, yes, to celebrate, in a way, hope, for the new year, hope for the continuation of our lives, but also to understand, I think, what you connect very often, which is the power of thoughts, that if we can generate hope, it is also something that comes from our own thoughts. And if you were to help us, to create our own Christmas gift, in a way, by helping us to understand more how to use our thoughts in such a way that they create inner freedom, that they create my capacity to not be angry but be more positive. How would you describe that power of thought?
How powerful is one thought? It can carry me to another continent. With one thought, I can be in Bombay or New York. With one thought, I can go back to days of childhood. I can go forward to what I'll be doing tomorrow or in 5 years' time. And so thought has no boundaries, thought has no barriers. But yes, thoughts can fluctuate between pure and elevated, or thoughts can carry me in a very negative direction. And so the power of thought is incredible. Whatever you see around you, how did it get created? One person had a thought, and that thought got shared. Amazing things happen just with the power of thought. Everything you see of beauty, where did it come from? Human-made, that came from the power of thought. The beauty of nature came from the divine. And still, even though we've desecrated nature, it's still beautiful. It's still amazing. Just a flower is an amazing gift of nature. So everything human-made, that started with just one thought. And so surely, with our power of thought, together we can create a better world. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Audrey, a last question before we...
Well, is there a last thought that you want to share with us tonight?
I want to share that every soul has beauty, and so let me see my own inner beauty. France, Paris is a place of beauty, and so the beauty is actually in here. And so see yourself each day. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning or tonight, see a beautiful shining light. but also when you see people around you, family, friends, colleagues, the people at the train station, wherever. Just see that shining light and see the beauty of the soul. And I think you'll make the world a better place.
Well, thank you, Sister Genti, and I think we can appreciate But before we let you leave Paris, we wanted to live another experience with you. So there will be one of our friends who is going to share some thoughts in French for the following meditation. Denzel will then conclude with a beautiful song. So this is a chance for you now to experiment. And so there will be some thoughts proposed for the meditation, but at the same time, you may want to create your own thoughts in between. And what I invite you to really is to sit again very comfortably and feel that the next 10 minutes will be for you, a time to really just apply. You may have heard a few beautiful thoughts tonight. Try to recollect some of them that you want to leave with. So it's not just in the air and then by the time you leave, it's all forgotten, but you can feel those thoughts again with you. Donc je vous invite à vous asseoir confortablement, vous détendre et profiter des prochaines minutes pour votre petit cadeau de Noël que vous faites à vous-même en étant en méditation pour les 15 prochaines minutes. Ça vous va? Oui? All right.
Sois Dieu et dans ma pensée dans mes yeux sois et dans mon regard dans ma bouche sois Dieu et dans mes paroles dans mon cœur sois Dieu et dans mes pensées vers la fin sois Dieu et amant de
confortablement. Et pendant quelques instants, je fais abstraction de tout ce qui m'entoure. Pour simplement faire l'expérience de tout ce que j'ai entendu. J'écoute ce qui se passe en moi. Je ressens la paix qui s'est installée tout au long de la soirée. Elle n'a rien à voir avec quoi que ce soit d'extérieur. En fait, la paix qui me semble bien souvent inaccessible existe au plus profond de moi. Toujours disponible à portée de pensée. Ce voyage intérieur me permet de me reconnecter à ce que je suis vraiment. Un être spirituel. Une énergie d'amour, de paix. Un être unique et beau. Au-delà des apparences, derrière les rôles, les titres, je suis cet être magnifique. Et ma beauté intérieure a simplement besoin d'un peu d'espace pour s'exprimer. Mais pour maintenir cette conscience, je dois apprendre à maîtriser mon monde intérieur. À tout moment, je peux dire oui ou non, de manière authentique. Je suis libre de choisir mes pensées, mes réponses aux situations. Je ne suis plus déterminée par les événements qui arrivent. Je décide de prendre ma vie en main. Et de l'orienter pour qu'elle soit davantage alignée sur mes valeurs. Tout est en moi tout est possible. C'est une question de choix, de responsabilité. La liberté intérieure m'ouvre d'autres horizons, d'autres façons de penser, plus créatives, qui me permettent de trouver des solutions là où je ne voyais que des problèmes. La liberté intérieure est un espace à conquérir. Elle n'est jamais totalement acquise. Je dois veiller pour la protéger des doutes, des influences extérieures, de la négativité. Elle se cultive. C'est un chemin qui me demande tous les jours un peu d'attention. Faire un pas de courage pour être fidèle à la lumière qui m'habite. Un pas de lucidité pour voir ce que j'ai à transformer. Un pas de douceur envers moi pour m'accepter tel que je suis. Et surtout, un pas de détermination et de patience pour recommencer les jours où elle n'est pas au rendez-vous. Plus je la laisse grandir, plus elle s'accompagne de davantage d'écoute et de respect de ma part, de tolérance, de compassion. Mon cœur s'ouvre et s'emplit de lumière. Et je ressens le besoin de la partager avec tous ceux qui m'entourent et bien au-delà, avec tous les êtres. Alors, cette vague de paix puissante que nous avons créée ensemble, nous pouvons l'envoyer partout dans le monde pour qu'elle apporte un peu de réconfort et beaucoup d'espoir. Cette parenthèse, qui n'a duré que quelques instants, m'a permis de redécouvrir les bienfaits de la méditation. Un moment de présence à moi-même, la clarté qui revient quand le mental s'apaise et l'ouverture du cœur la méditation. C'est un cadeau pour moi et pour le monde que je veillerai à intégrer dans mon quotidien. Om Shanti. Je suis une âme en paix.
C'est donc comment se termine notre soirée. On est très heureux de vous avoir accueillis ce soir. J'espère que ça vous a plu. Merci beaucoup. Vous avez entendu la voix de Solange pour le commentaire de méditation. Merci. So before I let you go, I just have a few announcements to make. On a donc voulu aussi souligner, vous savez quand même que le 21 décembre, ce sera donc la journée mondiale de la méditation déclarée par les Nations Unies. Ce sera donc la 2e année consécutive que cette journée est consacrée à la méditation. Donc un autre signe comme quoi la méditation, c'est pas juste une offre comme ça pour se faire du bien ou pour se détendre, mais c'est vraiment une reconnaissance mondiale, comme quoi la méditation aujourd'hui, depuis maintenant 2 ans, est reconnue comme vraiment un apport essentiel pour le bien-être du monde entier. Donc le 21 décembre, journée donc mondiale de la méditation, on aura la chance ici à Paris de vous accueillir, non pas au théâtre du 13e art, mais au centre de Raja Yoga de Paris. Et ce sera non seulement une invitation pour ceux qui habitent ici à Paris, mais tous ceux qui sont ici en France, puisque dans tous les centres de Raja Yoga en France, et il y en a beaucoup, il y aura des activités partout à travers la France. Le 21 décembre, ce sera en fait aussi la journée de la méditation, donc mais l'heure de méditation internationale dans tous les centres Brahma Kumari à travers le monde. Donc il y aura une rotation de 24 heures à travers les fuseaux horaires, pendant 24 heures, 1 heure de méditation partout à travers le monde. Le solstice d'hiver aussi, donc le 21 décembre, la nuit la plus longue, là où le jour commence à allonger, donc l'espoir, la transformation, la nouvelle année qui vient, la saison des fêtes. On va vous souhaiter une saison des fêtes très agréable, exceptionnelle. Également, avant de partir, vous savez que tous les programmes offerts par les Brahma Kumaris sont toujours offerts gratuitement. Je sais qu'il y en a plusieurs qui aiment beaucoup vouloir nous aider, contribuer. Vous aurez donc des indications à la sortie. Si certains veulent faire des dons, vous êtes les bienvenus, soit par en ligne, soit ici à la salle. Merci encore d'être venus en cette période occupée de l'année. So now it's time for a big, big thank you to the whole team that has made this event possible. On a Denzel Sinclair. On a toutes les traductrices derrière. C'est traduit en anglais, en français, en tamoul, en hindi. Nous avons des yogis qui nous ont gardé l'atmosphère puissante. Nous avons une armée de bénévoles qui ont rendu ce programme possible. Et bien sûr, votre participation qui était également essentielle. Alors j'inviterai, I will invite you, Sister Genti, to come back in the front to say goodbye to everyone. And we have something for you. Merci tout le monde et à très bientôt, on espère. Bonsoir tout le monde. Au revoir. Et je vous dis merci beaucoup Audrey, bien sûr, de s'être joint à nous. Merci beaucoup Audrey.